You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Hello.
The Psych with Mike library window is open.
That's a new way to start.
Yeah. I mean, I guess people could walk by and ask for ice cream, but
you can either look in the window or jump out.
Yeah,
whichever you want to do.
Whichever you feel is.
How do you feel about that?
I feel really good about it. The point is that it's very nice outside, and after the summer that we've had in St. Louis, I am really glad that the weather is milder.
It's been a beautiful week.
Yeah. So we don't even need to get into global warming because that's a crazy kind of divisive topic. But it was really hot this summer. Yeah. And it's hard.
It's still hot in major sections of the country and the world.
Yeah. And when you look at what's been going on in India, in a third of the country underwater, I can't even conceive of what that would be like.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm glad that we're going to get some milder temperatures. I am feared that the Farmer's Almanac is predicting a tremendous amount of snow in the St. Louis area for this winter. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah. So
how are you today?
I'm doing well.
You don't want to talk about anything we were talking about before we started this, do you?
No.
Okay. Because there's been lots of stuff going on.
There is always.
Always
that's the interesting thing in doing therapy. People come in and it's like there's always crap going on.
Lots of stuff going on. Yeah. So when you were doing therapy, I think that probably each individual person doing therapy has their own style. Obviously, yes.
Right, yeah.
And probably most people would have a different answer to this question. But what was your favorite or most important question in therapy?
How are you this week, and what would you like to talk about?
Mm-hmm. So,
what's hot? What's burning? What's in your mind?
Your mentor / hero, blanking on his name.
Yalom?
Yalom.
Yeah.
Irving Yalom. His intro question was, what ails? So in all of his books, that's how he would start out all of his therapy sessions.
It's what?
What ails?
What ails?
Yeah. Which I always found pedantic and beatnik-like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he always wore the black turtleneck, and I don't know that he wore, what is the cap that the French wear?
You know, we all have our affectations and our presentation.
Exactly.
I used to tell people, would call and say, yeah, I'm thinking about coming to you, I've been referred to you, how will I know? And I would say, it is incredibly important that there is a sense of safety and connectivity for this to work. So come see me. Come see me once or twice, and don't pay me. Mm-hmm. But if you come back the third time, pay me for 3 sessions and every session after that. But I really feel like if you spend some time with me, you will get a sense of whether I'm going to be a fit for you, whether I'm going to be able to hear you and what you need to talk about.
Right. Well, you're jumping the shark, because we definitely want to talk about what is a good therapist.
Yeah.
But so when we're talking specifically about the questions, do you believe that the therapist's questions are important for directing the course of therapy, or do you believe that the therapist is more of a passenger, a passive
So
observer.
I taught in a counseling program for 35 years, and I would constantly say to my students who wanted to become therapists, and in addition to having my private practice for all those years, but I would say to my students, you cannot do formula therapy. You can't have a formula that you follow for every client that comes in, whether that's a label that you apply to yourself. I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist, or I'm a Jungian therapist, or whatever. Because people don't know that and don't understand that. They don't know what it represents or what it means. What you need to say is, I am invested in paying attention to you and hearing what it is that you need to have heard, and then proving to you that I've heard you accurately and correctly, both in terms of what you say and in terms of what you're feeling when you say it. So we will explore that reality for you, and if that's a fit, then spending time here will help you make progress with whatever concerns that you have. I think you'll get better. But if I'm not the fit, then go somewhere else. Don't say, well, therapy doesn't work. I went to this guy and he was a bozo. There are bozos out there. But if you feel comfortable with me and we can spend time together, I believe that we can make progress in terms of what hurts you or what you need to address in your life to make your life better.
But just as far as the who's driving the train, do you believe that the therapist drives the train, or do you believe the client drives the train?
I believe the client drives the train.
Yeah. And
I'm not bringing it to the table. You are. My job is to ask you, what are you bringing to the table?
Right.
What's going on? And then do reflective listening to say, well, this week you said you were bringing to the table an argument that you had with your boss, but we spent 45 minutes here talking about other things. And I'm wondering how to understand that. If that's what was hot for you when you got here, we haven't even approached it. Again, we've nibbled at it a time or two, but we keep going down these other paths about this or that or the other. So I'm wondering how to understand that. I'm wondering how you understand that.
So the most important question is the question that helps to direct the client towards...
To hear themselves.
Yeah. Better self-awareness.
Right. And they'll come out and they'll throw out red herrings, so that they feel like we spent a productive hour, and you feel like we spent a productive hour, because we tried to solve this puzzle. And it's a very seductive thing. They'll ask for advice. What do you think? Well, in your experience, how does this work? Why? And they always want to talk about somebody else. Why is my mother doing this? Why is my mother this way? And to my thinking, the point of being there isn't to figure out why your mother's or your boss or your next door neighbor, why you are enduring this or tolerating this or making these choices. And we talk about emotional economics. You're frustrated, you're upset, you're angry, you're hurt, you're sad, whatever. How's that costing you? What's that costing you in terms of physiological issues? Are you having chest pains? Are you having anxiety attacks? Do you have headaches? Are you having trouble sleeping? You got TMJ problems? What's going on with the way that you handle this issue? And then in terms of your emotional status, are you grouchy? Are you angry? Are you sad? Are you numb? Are you frustrated? So many times having conversation with parents, and they would come in and talk about, and I said to my child, how many times do I have to tell you? And I'd start laughing at them, and I'd say, if you've heard yourself say that more than twice, you've said it too many times. So let's talk about plan B. If just telling them you need to do your homework, and they're not, or you need to wash the dishes, clear the table, whatever it is you've asked them to do, and they haven't done it, what's next?
So I think that many therapists, we've both been involved in programs, teaching in programs that educate the next generation of therapists. And from the therapists that I know and the students that I've taught, it feels like to me, and I could be wrong, so I'll ask you what your reflection on this is, that a lot of people who are going to school to be therapists want the formula. They want some kind of reassurance that you give me the formula, the questions to ask, I'll ask the questions, and then I've discharged my duty. That'll make me feel like that I'm doing what is right.
And the insurance companies support that thought.
Absolutely.
Because they want to pay certain amounts for certain things, and they claim that the data collection that they have justifies the approval or the expenditure of the money, investment of the time. But I keep coming back to, formula therapy and agenda therapy. I think both are not therapy. And I also would say 35 years of teaching and counseling program at 2 different universities, a lot of people who come to try to become therapists are so seriously wounded that they're going to hamstring themselves by their issues.
Right.
And their agendas. You can't be proselytizing for your agenda, whatever it may be, whatever you're really promoting as the right answer. That's not doing therapy.
Yeah. And when we were in grad school, and you did role play, everybody did role play.
I hate role play.
Okay, but everybody does it, and
I did it poorly.
Well, but we did role. I mean, we had actual groups in your group therapy class.
We did, But I said, we're not role playing.
Well, whether you call that role playing or not, but I used to say all the time, the next time that somebody says to me, the reason I got into this, because everybody asks, oh, why'd you get into this program? That's the icebreaker for every class that you go to. So the next time somebody says, oh, I have a dysfunctional family, I wanted to understand it better, I'm going to punch them in the throat. No doctor.
Which is a very clinical reaction. You're in a therapy program.
Well, I was in it. Yeah, it wasn't like I was doing therapy. And no doctor said, oh, I went to medical school because I knew my appendix was going to go bad at some point, and I wanted to be able to take it out.
To know how to deal with it, yeah.
So, that's a bad reason to go, I went to school to be a therapist
but Michael,
because I couldn't pass calculus.
It's not the reason. It's what they're saying. It's the answer that they give, but they're not deep enough. There's something under that. For what drives you, I want to help people. I'm on a mission from God. I believe in doing good in the world, whatever it might be. Or I think I know I was abused as a child, and I know how damaging abuse is, and so I want to protect all children from being abused.
But that's a reason to be in therapy, not a reason to do therapy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that. 100%.
Yeah. And so, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be doing therapy, but you shouldn't be, if you're using your own dysfunctional past as the motivation for why you're doing therapy, I think you're going to get caught up in that agenda profile.
Well, that is one of the reasons why for a number of years I refused to see acting out alcoholics, because I came from a violent alcoholic family, and I had so many of my own personal.
And that's called counter.
Don't feed me lines like that. You want to say it, say it.
That's called countertransference.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. Okay.
So you try not to do that. You don't want to do that as a therapist.
Yeah.
It disrupts the connection, the dynamic, the orientation of the session. They're paying you to listen to you, and that's not what you're supposed to be doing.
Right. And I didn't work with, and still don't, if I can help it, work with sexual abusers. And people say, oh, well, you should, work with everybody, or why, I didn't feel like, I don't work with borderlines. I don't feel like that is my clinical expertise.
You say I don't have the expertise, or you say those issues are too close to me. I can't see clearly. I can't hear.
But it is the therapist's responsibility to know what, the old dirty Harry line, a man's got to know his limitations.
Yeah.
You got to know what your limitations are, and you have to practice within those limitations. I don't not see borderlines because I don't think I'm clinically able. I don't see borderlines because I find that
push your buttons.
Yeah, I get seduced by the borderline presentation.
Or seduced or distracted.
Yeah.
Because they'll say, here, chase this rabbit, or here, chase this rabbit. And every once in a while, you're so focused on a particular kind of rabbit that you're like, oh, I'm after that. And then again, they're steering the direction of the conversation to reinforce their own circumstances, and justify them.
But it isn't, to me, it isn't a weakness for a therapist to say, this isn't my area of specialty.
No, I agree.
It's a strength.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Now, at the same time, I also don't think that new therapists should say, I'm exclusively an alcohol, substance abuse counselor?
No, because I think that makes them feel safe because they are trained or they know the right answer. They know the theories that they're taught in school or that they've been taught in school/AA. And so they notice, one day at a time. Let go and let God. And they say those things automatically in conversations. They can laugh about things like 13-stepping on a 12-step program. What the hell does that mean? What's going on there? So they know the inside works and they feel safer.
But individuals are never limited to whatever the presenting pathology is. And so if you say, I can only work with substance abuse individuals, but those people have other issues.
This diamond only has one facet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So my encouragement, my advice to people who are doing therapy or newly thinking about going into therapy is you got to find that balance. Don't try and practice outside your expertise, but also don't limit yourself to one specific pathology.
So then that brings me to therapists need to either...
Okay, hold on to that question or that thought, and we'll pick that up after our break.
I may forget.
Hey, Brett, if you were going to tell somebody to check out something on the internet to help them with their mental health, what would you tell them?
I tell them, listen to Psych with Mike.
Why would you tell them that?
Because it's probably one of the most easily listenable experiences you can have that will give you information that's useful for a whole spectrum of concerns that people have.
I agree, and I have actually been told that by at least a dozen people, several of whom were not married to me, and some of them didn't even know me.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. So when we get that kind of feedback from people, it is so incredibly humbling and overwhelming for me.
It is for both of us.
Yeah. So we really appreciate it, and as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. All right, we're back. Did you forget?
I don't know. It just comes and goes so quickly. No, what I was going to say is, and again, a thing that I used to say to people all the time, never practice alone. Mm-hmm. If you practice alone, it's too easy to get distorted and caught up in rhythms that if you had supervision and even collegial, not hierarchical supervision, working for a boss who can tell you yes or no, but collegial supervision. And most therapists that I know do have those kind of groups that they meet with and they talk to. And you say, I have this client that's really pushing all my buttons, or I have this client that's presenting this thing, and it makes me so sad, or I'm so concerned about them that I'm losing my objectivity, or I have issues with keeping boundaries for this particular kind of experience. And other therapists and clinicians can say, well, I have that, so you're not crazy, you're not rare, and this is a way that I work with it. How do you work with it? And we can have those conversations to help keep you professional and focused, keep both you and your client safe from contamination. And it's really an important issue.
So do you think that therapy, so if I'm doing therapy and I'm in therapy, does that serve
that was
the
a
same
conversation
function?
that we had for 35 years.
Yeah.
Does every therapist need to be in therapy?
Yeah.
And I would not make that as a legalistic qualifier. I would say it's probably a good idea, but I would say you need to have collegial or hierarchical supervision over your cases.
So I want to drill down on that a little bit, because I think that you should be in therapy if you're doing therapy, because I think it keeps clean the transference, countertransference, projective identification. But I'm not sure that it serves the same function as collegial supervision. I'm not sure
Say
that.
more.
Okay, so if I'm going to therapy and I'm talking about my countertransference, that may help me be cleaner in being able to identify and deal with the countertransference, but may not necessarily help me in the area of boundaries.
So I went to therapy, and one of the challenges that I understood going in, that I discussed with my therapist going in, is having done therapy as a provider for 35 years, I feel like I'm at risk to play therapy games and head games. If you help me find a live nerve that might be painful or frightening for me, instead of going with that and experiencing whatever that is, I'm capable of distracting you with something else. And I don't want to do that, so we both need to help watch me, and so that I can avoid that. Because, as any other human being, when I get to the most raw places inside me that I'm trying to get out and put on display for the therapist to say, how do you understand this? What does that make you think about me? Am I accurately pulling it out of me, or am I still guarding it and guiding it and lying about it? It's a scary proposition, so I will avoid it. And people do that in therapy all the time. That's why the presenting problem that they first come to you with is almost never the real issue in their lives. It is an issue. It's a real issue, but it's never the issue. So you have to spend enough time making them safe, solving problems, not solving for them, but with them, so they can build the trust in the process and in you and in themselves to be able to look deeper.
Yeah. So do you agree, though, that therapy is not the same as collegial supervision?
Yes, I do.
And so if you're going to have one, you should definitely have collegial supervision. You can certainly have both, and both can be beneficial.
I would say that, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what we're saying to people, is that you got to at least have the collegial supervision.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be formalized. Like, you and I have had a relationship since before I was ever a therapist. So for as long as I've been a practicing therapist, you and I have had that relationship.
So that doesn't make me liable by extension for any screw up. Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But I mean, you have to.
You're trying to blame all that on me. I know where this is going.
You have to take that responsibility on for yourself. But so sometimes that was more formalized when we were in a group practice together, and sometimes it's been less formalized. I don't think that it needs to be formal. I think that you have to.
You can do it over coffee. You just need to do it on a regular basis.
Right.
And all of the knowledgeable or trained or licensed participants need to bring something to the table. What have you been seeing? Because another thing that happens, and it's really
that's
odd,
such a great point, though,
is themes or threads go through a community, and it's like wildfire contagion. So you get a half a dozen new clients, and they're all dealing with depression. And you go to collegial therapy, and everybody else is saying, "My God, I've had so many people coming in with depression in the last couple of weeks. It's in the water." By way of an example, and it's helpful to get that feedback, and it's helpful to get everybody else's perspective on how are you dealing with that, how are you approaching that.
I remember having a meeting. I don't know if you'll remember this, but when we were in a group practice,
right,
and the gal who was the director actually took you and I into a room because she wanted to have these grand clinical meetings.
Yeah.
And so we would have these meetings and say, okay, somebody needs to present a case, and crickets. And she took you and I into a room and said, you guys are the seniors here. Everybody looks up to you, and you guys need to present because that'll make everybody else feel safe. And I don't know that either one of us, well, I wasn't opposed to the presenting. I was opposed to the way it was presented to me.
Yeah,
because I
quasi-staged.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it was like like we were getting dressed down because nobody else would participate. But I will say that we started doing those things regularly, and other people did start to open up, and some of those meetings were really, really good and beneficial. I think not just for the individual who was presenting the information, but for everybody,
for the community
that was in that room. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that can be so powerful.
Absolutely. And encouraging. You get reinforced that you're not seeing it wrong. You're not seeing it incorrectly. You're handling it well according to the committee opinion. And that's positive affirmation, and we all appreciate positive affirmation.
So let's circle back to what the original topic was, which was the most important question in therapy.
Yeah.
And this idea of the difference between an open-ended and a closed-ended question. What's the difference between those things?
So a couple of things occur to me. One is when clients would come in, new clients would come in, sometime in the first session or two, one of the questions that I would ask is, if our work together is productive and positive and on target, how will your life be different? If what we do together is beneficial for you, what will be different? What are you looking for? Do you know? Do you think? Do you feel? Your relationship with your mother be improved? Your relationship with your mother be severed? You'll get out of bankruptcy? Who knows what it's going to be? But you have a concept of that. So then they start talking.
And what that does is sets for the therapist, if not the client, what the goals of therapy are. So a lot of times people talk about, oh, you got to have goals and you got to write. I mean, it doesn't have to be that formalized. That question right there helps me as the therapist understand. That may be, what the client says in response to that question might be what they're looking for, but it might not. I mean, it might just be what they're talking about because they don't feel safe enough to really peel back the layers of the onion yet.
Not yet.
Right. But those are ways of establishing goals in therapy. So if you're a new therapist and you're asking that question, what you're getting, the information you're getting back helps you to understand where the client might want to go in the therapy session.
And so as you listen to a client, there are different labels and skill techniques that this discusses, but you listen to the phraseology and the verbalisms that they use, and that helps you learn how they think and how they experience. Neuro-linguistic programming is a term, and you listen to what they say, and you listen between the lines. You hear more and you watch the nonverbals, and you learn when to say, wait a minute, I'm picking something up here that's not in focus. It could be me that's out of focus, but it could be you. And so give me some feedback. Am I getting this accurately? Are you struggling with this? Did you just twitch? Did you just have a flash of a distraction or a thought? And that's called what the hell is it called? I just went blank. Silent. Okay. I lost it.
Okay. Well, so a closed-ended question is a question that can be answered with a single word. So if I say, did you go to the store yesterday?
Yes or
you
no.
can say yes or no.
Yeah. Which store?
Right. But an open-ended question, it requires more of an elucidation. So if I say to you, what was your fondest childhood memory? And you say Saturday, well, obviously it requires more input than that.
Right.
So in therapy, we're trying to ask open-ended questions because the answer that is provided by the client could give us additional information that's more than just
it's like
an
a
answer to the
roadmap.
question.
It gives you a directional approach. But there is one open-ended question that you never, ever, 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 ever ask.
Do you like me?
Everybody always does. No. Why?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I lost my temper and punched my boss in the nose. Why would you do that? Why do you lose your temper? I don't know. How are they going to answer that? So you don't say why.
So you don't ask open-ended questions that put the client in a down position.
No, you don't do that. You ask them exploratory questions.
Yeah.
How do you understand that? How did you experience it? What did it feel like?
Yeah. Well, and then so now you're going back because I asked you originally what was your most important question in therapy, but I never answered that. For me, it is how do you feel about that? Because emotional regulation is so much a central part of how I see human pathology. That for me is the most important question. Except, is how do you feel about that?
I think most people answer that with how they think about that.
And I point that out.
Yeah, because you got to get to the feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
And so one of the first things that I do is to train clients that if I say, how do you feel about that? You have to answer glad, mad, sad, or scared. You can't, because if you don't use an affective, AFFECT, affective word, which is the psychological word for emotion, then you're telling me how you think. So if I ask you, how do you feel about that? And you say, I felt disrespected. Well, you can't feel disrespected. That's not a feeling. You can think that you were disrespected, and let's assume for the sake of argument that you did think that you were disrespected. How do you feel about that? Well, I felt angry. Okay, now we're talking about affect. And so I train people to use that affective language so that and as they start to go through therapy, they get reinforced with that. Hopefully they'll take that outside of therapy. So when they start talking to other people in their lives, they'll actually start having those affective conversations rather than just talking about how they think. Because you're absolutely right. 99% of us, 99% of the time, when we are asked how we feel, we tell people what we think.
Well, and classically men answer, I don't know.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'll end with this little anecdote. But when I was working at the hospital, there was another guy that worked there, and I'm not going to say his name, but to be honest with you, I don't remember what his name was. This was a long, long time ago. And he would do groups, and his response to everything that anybody said in group was anger about that, anger about that,
Yeah.
anger about that. And I said to him one day, you know, there are more emotions than just anger. How much it would have just been so easy to say, oh, so how did you feel about that? How did that make you feel? But he would just always say anger about that. And yes, maybe the person was angry, but maybe they were hurt and they were using anger as a cover-up. And that's one of the things, and that's what I want to end on, is that most people in our society, at least, and I think in the world in general, use anger as a way to cover up hurt. And a part of therapy is to go deep enough to help people recognize the way that they might be covering their emotions with other emotions.
Right, camouflage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Accurate, reflective listening.
Yes.
That's what I couldn't remember.
So important.
Yeah.
Essential. The music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. What we would love is if you are a regular listener to the show, or even if you're not, even if this is the first time you've ever heard the show.
If you're irregular.
Yeah. Go to Apple Podcasts and find Psych with Mike and rate us and leave a review. That is super, super beneficial. We would really, really like it if you would go onto the YouTubes, find Psych with Mike, and subscribe to the show there. That is very, very helpful. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.